Bord Gáis Energy, proud sponsors of the GAA All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship and GAA Legends Tour Series of Croke Park. Hashtag hurling to the core.
Hello and welcome to the Throw-In Independent.ie's GAA podcast in association with Bord Gáis Energy. I'm Will Slattery, delighted to be joined as always by Michael Verney. Michael, hello.
How's it going, Will?
Not too bad. Championship is back up and running. Are you buzzing?
Yeah, well, there was obviously a good few one-sided games over the weekend, but I think even I was at the Leinster football match with Wexford or Longford and Carlow yesterday, and you're kind of thinking, if you took Dublin now a Leinster, you'd have some Leinster championship. You could nearly throw a blanket over a good few of the other teams, and it was probably in Leinster where we saw the two very best games of the weekend, Offaly and Louth, which we'll go into later, and Longford Carlow, two real competitive games. But it's hard to know where to look every Saturday and Sunday now. There's so much going on, but it's great. It's great to have it back.
I know, it's wall-to-wall sport. There's so much to enjoy. We're going to actually talk about the football championship in the second half of the show. We're going to be joined by Ciaran Whelan. But first, it's hurling, and while Brendan Cummins is going to join us in a couple of minutes, we're going to kick things off with Conor McKeon here. Conor, how are you?
Good, Will.
Big game of the weekend, Clare versus Waterford, kicking off the Munster Championship. Clare have regrouped pretty well from that rocky start to the National League when they lost to Antrim. They lost to Wexford as well, having had a good lead. But I suppose the win over Kilkenny maybe signalled they were turning a corner and, beating last year's All-Ireland finalists and only 4 points in the scoreboard. But I think everyone was in agreement that with 20 odd wides or so, they could have been a lot further ahead. What did you make of the game?
Well, it was a very important win for Brian Lohan, above all else. I think, they need that. But, I think they started to come good in the league when they played Dublin and Parnell Park. You could see they put a big emphasis on winning that game and then beating Kilkenny in the last game. So they have proper momentum now. The big thing for me yesterday, from the Clare point of view, was how good John Conlon was. I think, like a lot of people, I was pretty sceptical about how that was going to work out at the start. I think, the theory behind having a player like Conlon as your sweeper or your centre back, whatever way you want to define him, sometimes it doesn't always work in practice. But defensively, he was very, very good. He was kind of nearly the loose defender, so he could go and attack the pressure points without having to, worry about the man that he was marking. And I thought it was a stroke of genius from Lohan to play Tony Kelly at full forward as well. In the expectation that Caleb Lyons was going to pick him up. And obviously, Caleb Lyons doesn't want to be playing on his full back line. He's not going to be scoring points from in there. And it didn't dilute Kelly's scoring threat, I know that it's a bit of a contradiction. You think playing closer to goals, you get more scores, but not in hurling at the moment. And Kelly had been so good out around the middle of the pitch, particularly in the last two games of the league, that it was probably a bit of a risk to put him in there. But right from that first ball, when he came out, got in front of Lyons, to touch, to turn, to strike, he was in brilliant form. So it was a huge win for Clare, because I think those two experiments, which could have fallen flat on their faces, both came through. And but for that patch in the third quarter, I think they were completely dominant.
Yeah, Michael, kind of touched on most of the key points there. For me, the most interesting one is that John Conlon performance, because when it was done during the league, you're thinking the definition of robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're taking one of the most destructive inside forwards and you're putting him in a very unfamiliar position. Then they get off to a ropey start in the league, and you're thinking this could probably be the end of Brian Lohan's tenure if it doesn't go well. But then yesterday, he was so integral. Tactically, what did you make of the decision and how it's paying dividend now?
Yeah, I didn't hear one person backing that decision, particularly after the Antrim game. Not one. You were taking he looked like a bit of a fish out of the water against Antrim. You were taking all-star full forward and putting him back centre back. But in fairness, there's and I mean this as a compliment, but there's an ignorance to Brian Lohan that has to be admired. It really, really does. He makes a decision, and people would have been so skeptical about that, but he makes a decision. He stuck by it. He gave him 5 games there in the league, thinking that he'd be ready to go fill this important position, and an important position that was probably left open by the way that Pat O'Connor was out. So he was out for the season, so he knew he had to kind of relocate someone to centre back. He did it with Conlon, and his reading of the game was brilliant. He was always filling a gap to make sure that Waterford couldn't play a ball into Desi Hutchinson or play a ball into Shane Bennett. He was brilliant, and I suppose more importantly, on the ball he was giving into Aaron Shanner, it was just on a plate for him. It was beautiful. It was a back formerly as a forward, knowing exactly how they want the ball to be delivered in. He was brilliant. I thought there was a couple of, Conor mentioned that playing Tony Kelly inside, Waterford were just missing any spark going forward that Lyons would usually give them. And in fairness as well, there was a couple other ones. Colin Galvin only played 2 games in the league. Thought he was really, really smart on the ball. He knew probably he didn't have the work done that maybe other players had done, so he was getting rid of the ball when he had it rather than maybe hold on to it like he normally would. And in fairness to them, like, people had talked about whether the art of defending was dead, particularly even after Saturday with the Leinster Championship, with the scores that were put up. But like, if you looked at how Clare defended and got in the faces of the Waterford lads, like, there was one stage in the first half where Shane Bennett was that bottled up that he drop hooked the ball at I think it was Paul Flanagan's legs. He was that frustrated. Like, Clare were in their faces. Like, it may have only been 2 weeks between league and championship, but this was championship intent from Clare, and Waterford just didn't make that step up. And fair play to Brian Lohan. I think Brendan Cummins had a good one at the start of his intro to his column today. He just said, sometimes if there's a row in a family and others start to interfere, offering their opinion, the family can actually come together, starting to turn on outsiders. And that's basically what Clare looked like they've done. That was a 4-point hammer, and they were 10 points the better team yesterday.
Well, there was certainly a lot of rows in the family in the build-up. It sets up a really exciting game against Tipperary next weekend, which you might circle back to in a bit. But then for Waterford, Conor, like, I know they only had 8 guys starting from that All-Ireland final appearance, so that's half a team. So yeah, I think you have to give them maybe a little bit of rope. But in terms of the performance, like, what jumped out to you in terms of why they didn't hit the pitch that they would have wanted to?
Well, I think, the things that they do particularly well, Clare focused on them and didn't let them. Like, I saw Clare in the flesh in Parnell Park a few weeks ago against Dublin, and the Clare setup was interesting on the Dublin puckouts because they all pulled over to one corner. And they gave Dublin a short puckout and then set up along the 45, and they had so many bodies through the middle. They were basically saying to the Dublin goalkeeper or the Dublin defence, okay, you can have the short puck out, we'll give you possession, but you're going to have to run it through the lot of us. And if not, you're going to have to go long. And we've got so many bodies back here that you're not going to win the ball. And that's exactly what they did to Waterford. Like, Waterford, the whole Liam Cahill rebuild, the sort of players that he left out and the players that he brought in, they run the ball extremely well. They have an awful lot of dynamic ball carriers, and they just could not get through the throng. But even besides that, like, there's no getting away from how poor Waterford were in the things that they usually do well. They over carried the ball a lot. They were giving away frees. They didn't deal well with some of Clare's tackling, and like, we wouldn't have Clare down as being one of the more physical teams in the country. So, and again, Hutchinson and Bennett, they just didn't get the ball. It didn't come to them, and when they did, it wasn't clean. It wasn't where they wanted it. It wasn't in space. They were nearly getting recycled ball. And for an inside forward, particularly against a Clare defence that held so many bodies back there, it's very, very hard to get your scores. Now, in fairness, they came back into it because, and they will have something to build on from that, because, if you limp your way through to a 10-point defeat or an 11-point defeat, to turn it around for a qualifier is going to be next to impossible. So, at least they kind of finished well, but I'm not sure that, when Waterford management come to reflect on it, that, yesterday was their best day at the office either.
Yeah, and in terms of one of their tactical decisions, Michael, putting Callum Lyons on Tony Kelly, after the Galway game, he had 5 points in play. He was that real raiding half back. It was contributing on the scoreboard. It's easy to say now that it didn't really work. Like, what do you make of that decision?
Yeah, it didn't work, as Conor said, because Clare didn't allow it to work. Last year, Kelly was wing forward, and he obviously injured himself early in that All-Ireland quarter-final, and it suited Lyons to be out there in his normal position. It was a difficult one for Liam Cahill. They had an inexperienced full backline with Conor Prunty missing, and obviously Stephen O'Keefe is not there from last year, and even they were missing Tyke de Burke and they were missing Jamie Barron, so they were missing 1, 3, 6 and 8. But particularly in that full backline, they would have felt that they couldn't have leave Tony Kelly in there in what would have been a rookie full back line. So they felt they had to bring Lyons back in. But when he went out to the half back line, even though Aidan McCarthy did a small bit of damage on him, like, he just offered them that threat going forward, offered them that energy that just wasn't, that no one else was really offering them. I think from Cattle's point of view, it's interesting. When he was over at Tip Miners, when they won the All-Ireland, they were beaten early in that campaign and bounced back. When he was over the 20s, when the 21s, when they won the All-Ireland, they were beaten comprehensively by Cork in the Munster final and bounced back. They obviously bounced back from a Munster final defeat last year. The language he used after I thought was interesting. He mentioned a couple of times that they failed and a lot of Waterford players failed and it just wasn't acceptable. He said that they had 11 lads training yesterday morning on the extended panel. And he basically said, like, what are they thinking now looking at this game and how do I have to make the squad, or what do I have to do to make the squad? So definitely expecting he's going to shake things up a good bit. As Conor said, though, at least it wasn't a really, really demoralising defeat, and it could have been if they'd been beaten by 10 or 12, which they probably justifiably should have been. So they have a chance to bounce back. They should have a couple of winnable games to get on the road, and hopefully from their point of view that they'll have Conor Prunty and Jamie Barron back. But it is going to be difficult to turn things around. I think there was a wave of optimism around them after that Tipperary game, and the second season syndrome of Cahill and been beaten in an All-Ireland final last year. It's going to take a good bit to bounce back. I still think they have plenty in their arsenal to bounce back, but it is going to be difficult.
And if they get some of those injured players back as well, it'll be key over the next few weeks. It's funny, I'm sure you guys wouldn't have seen it because you guys were out and about yesterday, but watching the coverage on TV at the final whistle, you would have thought Waterford had salvaged the draw. Marty Morrissey was like, what character, what courage, Liam Cahill will be delighted with. It's like, well, they did get hammered for the most part, Marty. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit. One thing in the game, Conor, that has been talked about is the black card incident. I suppose the penalty in the first half was a key moment in the game. Did you think it was harsh? Like, I know there was a discussion yesterday on the Sunday game about it, and I think it was maybe split down the middle. It's a rule that's, I suppose, still in its infancy. It hasn't been too controversial so far, I don't think, but that was one incident yesterday that got a bit of a kind of a talking point.
Like, we shouldn't even be having conversations about whether these things are harsh or not, because it's either a breach of the rule as described or it's not. So I mean, the ref decided that it was, and that it was a penalty.
Conor, was it a goal scoring chance?
That's the thing. Is there someone there? Like, if it's like that's the key sort of qualifier within the rule, and it's impossible to say in that situation. He was definitely going towards goal. So if that's how you want to define it, that's fine. And if that's how every referee defines it this summer, I think that's also fine. But I mean, if I was a referee, I have to say I'd err on the side of caution, and I don't think that happened yesterday.
There's no way that was a penalty. There's no way that was a penalty for me. It's a yellow card, definitely, because it's dangerous what Shane Fives did. But he was still, like, it's not as if Shannon had burned Fives and was straight through on goal. Shane Fives was that close enough where he could actually hit him with his hurl, which fair enough is the yellow card. Daly was in front of him and Billy Nolan was behind. So I don't think that was a goal scoring chance. I don't think Jaron Chandler would have even thrown up the ball to take a shot at goal with Daly standing in front of him. I think that was the yellow card. And obviously, fair enough, Clare should have won by more, but there was 4 points between them at the end. Obviously, the goal is three of that, and Shane Fives was off for 10 minutes. So I have no issue with it was a cynical foul, but to me, it didn't deny a goal scoring opportunity.
Yeah. The only thing, like, I sort of agree with you all the way there. The only thing I'll say is that in a defender in that sort of situation, when the player is like running towards goal and you're that close to the goal, I think had it been more of a poor attempt at a tackle as opposed to a deliberate foul, you might have got away with it. But in that situation, it was very obviously a deliberate foul. Whether it's a goal scoring chance, that's open to interpretation. But if you're a defender, I don't think you can really blame anybody but yourself. You
have to err on the side of caution now, don't you, really? I suppose, yeah.
And then looking ahead to next weekend, Michael, like Clare playing Tipperary, I was checking there. Like, Clare's still pretty decent underdogs in the bookies anyway. But can this win be a springboard, do you think? Like, is the momentum they get from this after turning that league campaign around enough to get over Tipperary, do you think?
Yeah, not so sure, to be honest with you. It's funny, I would have thought Waterford would have had a great chance of beating Tipperary. I would have fancied them to beat Tipperary if they'd won. I'm not so sure with Clare. Interesting to see what Tip do with Tony Kelly. Probably Brendan Maher, I'd say, or Barry Heffernan will probably pick him up and track him wherever he goes. I'm not sure if to be able to bring the same kind of, it's a bit of a cliche. I'm not sure if they can bring the same intensity to a game a week later against a Tipperary side that are full of class. What Tipperary can bring, maybe the Tip won't be able to match, is that kind of athleticism all over the pitch. They have runners all over the pitch. I don't know if you could say the same about Tipperary, particularly in the forward line. While they have all the silk, I don't know if they have the legs to really hurt Clare. I think it'll be tight enough, but I'd still be fancy Tipperary to win. It'd be different if Clare have a game under the belt. It'd be different if it was they'd had a big layoff from the league, and it was a big thing to have a game under your belt. I don't know, it's hard to gauge whether having a game under your belt, playing a week later, having just finished the league, is actually a positive or not. But I still think, Tipperary deserve to be favourites, in fairness. I just think they'll have a bit too much class up top.
Yeah, it sets up two nice semi-finals in Munster next weekend with Cork Limerick on the Saturday night as well. And the Leinster Championship got underway as well, Conor, and I suppose it kind of shows how rocky Dublin's league campaign was, that beating Antrim and beating them in style as well is such a big thing for them, because I know Brendan Cummins had been talking a lot that he really thought Antrim could go and beat Dublin. Like, where does this leave them? Were you impressed with how comprehensive the victory was?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a record score for Dublin in Championship hurling history. So, in a game where there are people talking about you as possibly being upset, you have to take that. The thing that Dublin will take huge encouragement from is some of the criticism of the last couple of years of Dublin under Matty Kenny was that they'd become a little bit too methodical or too rigid. And if you go back to the only Dublin team that anybody remembers in 2013 under Anthony Daly, they were the exact opposite. It was all fire and brimstone and playing off the cuff and heart and physicality. But in a situation where there's a possibility of causing an upset, in a situation where you might be put under a bit of pressure, having that system, having that sort of reliance on your method and a game plan is what you need. And you could see that Dublin were quite methodical on Saturday, but they had, they did it at a better pace than they'd be doing during the league. When you try and play like that and it looks too deliberate and too forced, when you're not going well at it can make a team look really bad. But Dublin looked pretty fluid now on Saturday. I know they showed a segment on the Sunday game, but they were very varied in what they did. They went short with puckouts, they went long with puckouts. They could run the ball out of defence. They let the ball in early. And I think they were responding to what kind of shape that Antrim took on the pitch. And it's a huge score to run up. It's an enormous score. 331 was it? So the equivalent of 40 points. Cian O'Sullivan, who came in, who wouldn't have played only for Eamon Dillon, did his Achilles and is out for the season. He scored a goal, and he's a fella who can do that as well. So they're in a good place. If Dublin were going cold into a game against Galway off the back of a dodgy league campaign, it'll be impossible to say with any confidence that they'd even put up a big performance. But coming in after that performance at the weekend, I think that they'll make that one a much better game than we would have expected before Saturday.
Well, we're delighted to welcome Brendan Cummins to the Throw-In podcast as well today. Brendan, how are you getting on?
Very good now. Yeah, very good.
We were just discussing Dublin's win over Antrim. I know you, going into the game, thought Antrim had a good chance of an upset there. So were you impressed with how Dublin responded?
Thanks for reminding me of that. Yeah,
you probably drove them on.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but either way, Matty Kenny was, I don't know, is it holding back? Two things struck me in the game. One is Antrim. It was the first time I think that Antrim would have had expectations on themselves to win a match. They thought, we're on the brink of doing something special here, and they got a little bit caught rabbit in the headlight stuff. They were stuck to the ground, but the Dubs were seriously impressive. Sutcliffe, Crummy in the half-forward line, every puck out, it sticks, which is what they'll need against Galway now. And inside, Hayes and Boland were particularly good. Hayes, his size, he's tracking back, his work rate. Boland then, when he gets inside, he's going looking for goals. O'Sullivan the same way. And of course, you had the usual old reliables with on the full back. And then you had obviously Liam Rush. So overall, Dublin brought an athleticism to the game that is, I suppose, their trademark. And I was delighted to see it, because I think we need Dublin going well in the Leinster Championship, and they'll certainly be in their bonnet. So I'll just keep writing them off if that's what it takes to try to get them to perform again like this, because they were really, really impressive the other night in Navan.
Yeah, the one thing, Will, maybe that they have to watch is where Neil McManus dropped in. He didn't play as an orthodox centre forward, and Liam Rush was probably playing more as a sweeper than a marking six, and he popped up in little pockets of space around the place and got 6 points from play. The next day the guy that plays that role would probably be Joe Canning, and Dublin have an awful lot of thinking to do as to their matchups. Who's going to take Conor Whelan. For as good as Dublin's full back line was at the weekend, Paddy Smith and Cian O'Sullivan wouldn't be the two quickest marking cornerbacks in the world. And then you have to find one of your midfielders who's going to be able to go with Cathal Mannion all around the pitch. So just from that point of view, I'm sure Matty Kenny has already taught this all down the way. But, allowing Neil McManus to get 6 points from play, it might be a minor gripe, but it's the sort of thing that could set you back in a big way the next day if it's Joe Canning playing in that role.
Yeah,
but I think a lot of that game too turned out to be, I won't say a tournament match for all the world, but he was just let float around the place. Dublin did what they liked; they were in total control of what they were at. But it's a fair point, and that's for every number 11 around the country. That's the conundrum that all the managers have to fix when he goes deep. What do you do with him?
And Michael, Wexford's big win over Laois, 5-28 from play, I think, which is an astronomical score. It kind of shows us how much they had it their own way. Does that do anything for your opinion of Wexford? I know going into it, you thought maybe the project had probably reached its apex a couple of years ago and they mightn't be in a great position going into the championship. How are they set, do you think, now?
Yeah, it's a hard one to judge. I suppose during the league, I don't know, was there any stage where they started a game with Kevin Foley, Chin, McDonald and Rory O'Connor all starting really? They've got 5 or 6 big hitters and have to have them on the pitch, I think, at all times if they're to flourish. They were very good the other day. It has to be taken with the caveat. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what way Laois were setting up the other day. It was unbelievably defensive, and if containment was what they were looking for with the score that they conceded, like it was an absolutely ridiculous score to be conceding if you're trying to play defensive and trying to bring lads behind the ball. Like there was times there where Laois had hardly anyone inside their own 65 at their attacking end. It was very, very strange. They didn't provide much resistance to Wexford, but in fairness, that kind of energy and enthusiasm that we associate with Wexford when they're going well, the likes of Diarmuid O'Keefe, Burning lads, that was kind of there again the other day. They'll go into that Kilkenny game with huge confidence. They beat them in 17, they beat them in 19, and I think they'll fancy their chances of beating them again. But would they have learned much from the other day? I'm not so sure really.
So, Brendan, going into those 2 Leinster semi-finals, Galway, Dublin, Kilkenny, Wexford, Galway, Kilkenny are the standout favourites, but can you see either Dublin or Wexford winning next weekend?
I can see Wexford certainly putting in a huge shift against Kilkenny. I think the game for both teams, their confidence needed. I know you say they didn't get out of it, but us on the outside looking in. But if you're in that dressing room, I think Wexford in the last quarter scored 3-6 or 3-4 or something. But it showed an intent and a hunger that, look, we want to keep pushing on. Jack O'Connor came on. I thought he's exceptionally good. But their confidence needed that kind of a beating to give out to a team. And I think both of them now are on par with both Galway. I think Galway are exceptionally strong. They'll be looking to win Leinster, win the All-Ireland and all this kind of stuff. So it's a fair challenge now. It's a completely different landscape, this Leinster semi-final today than it was when we were chatting about it Friday evening. That's one thing for sure. And now Galway and Kilkenny are well warned about what kind of a storm is coming.
And from a Munster perspective, what did you make of the Clare-Waterford game? I know you were writing about it in today's Irish Independent. Michael, Verney's already quoted your line about family squabbles and how it can sometimes bring the family closer together. Were you impressed with Clare overall?
I was impressed with the way the hunger and enthusiasm they showed around the pitch. I mean, they disrupted what Waterford wanted to do. Waterford got punch drunk for the first 2.5 quarters, we'll say, of the game. I think Waterford sacrificed a huge amount by playing Caleb Lyons in the full back line. Brian Lohan did exceptionally well in leaving Tony Kelly in there, like I wrote about today. He just kept Caleb Lyons out of the game and he made sure that his sharpshooter was in the game when he needed to be around the goals. But John Conlon at 6 as well. I think I better keep writing lads off because he seemed to be playing really well when I'm doing it. The lads around him, Conlon, they did really well to protect him as well. The 2 wing forwards sat back, Malone in the middle of the field and Galvin sat. And Waterford in a lot of ways played into their hands. They hit the ball long. They just, and I suppose it's a byproduct of missing 8, or they only had 8 last year's All-Ireland final team who ran the ball perfectly and knew exactly what the system looked like. It just seemed to me that when the cornerbacks like Gleeson got the ball, they just want to hit it long. They panicked a small bit. But fair play to Clare. They fully deserved it and should have won by an awful lot more. And again, Tipperary are on fair notice after last weekend now as to what's coming down the tracks next Sunday.
Yeah, so how do you view that game? Tipperary obviously played pretty recently, as Michael pointed out earlier. It's not like the long layoff you traditionally have after the league. Are they in a good position facing Clare, or does this kind of give Clare a bit of a springboard, and does that make them dangerous?
Oh, it makes them dangerous, there's no doubt about that, because Clare are a team full of confidence now after the weekend. I mean, you only look at Brian Lohan at the end of the third quarter, like he was spitting fire about, I'd say he was saying about the wides and the expletives are coming out, but you could see the passion and the spirit of 95, I think, is what was pouring out of him. And that's what Clare supporters would have wanted. That ferocious, vicious attitude towards the game, never say die. yes, they made mistakes, but you're going to make that when you're trying as hard as what Clare were trying. And the same thing the weekend, but they will have to be more economical when they're shooting. They can't hit, I think, any more than 10, 11 wides against Tipperary. And the other thing they can't do is let Ronan Maher stand 80 or 90 yards from their goals looking in at Shamie Callanan or John McGrath in the full forward line, like they let the Waterford full back line and half back line do. Tipperary would deliver the ball way more efficiently, way more in a more dangerous area. And if Tip can get the ball inside John Conlon's screen there, I think they'll have enough for that Clare full back line. But that'll be the interesting one. Can Clare push up now on Tipperary to stop them delivering the ball in?
Well, some very big games to look forward to next weekend. For the moment, Brendan, thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Well, it's now time for the Football on the Throne podcast in association with Bord Gáis Energy. We're delighted to welcome Ciaran Whelan to the show. Ciaran, how are you?
Good, well, not a bother. Yourself?
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. I was going to kick off with the weekend's action, but I suppose since the Sunday game last night, there's been a lot of speculation about Stephen Cluxton and his future. I know Des Cahill asked you if you thought he'd be playing in the first championship game. I think the question now is, do you think he'll play at all for Dublin in 2021?
I hope that he does. Well, is the honest answer. But I suppose word probably filtered around Dublin that, you know, he had played for Clontarf over the weekend, or played for Parnells over the weekend, and I suppose if he's playing a week before a championship for his club, it doesn't indicate a strong message. So it doesn't appear that he's back in the squad from what I'm hearing. As I said last night, I hope that I'm wrong on that, and I hope he's agreed a pathway back, and maybe he's easing himself back in over the next 5 or 6 weeks. But he's not back at the moment, I don't think, and that is of concern from a Dublin perspective. Now, listen, Evan Comerford will be well able to slot in there next week. He's got great experience over the last couple of years, but we know what Cluxton has brought to the party for Dublin over the last 5-6 years. So I'm sure Conor McKeon has been investigating this for the last 24 hours and has a better inside track than I do. But yeah, it doesn't appear to be good at the moment.
Yeah, Conor, like, what's your gut feeling on it? Is this kind of the classic Stephen Cluxton way of stepping away from his legendary career, just not mentioning it at all and just not turning up when the championship starts? And if that is the case, what does that mean for Dublin? Like Colm Keys last week said Edmund Coverford is a top 5 goalkeeper in Ireland in his opinion, but in terms of losing Stephen Cluxton, do you think that's what's happened?
It definitely looks that way. I mean, I honestly don't know, and I'm just surprised that either between Cluxton giving a definitive answer to Dublin management or Dublin management taking their own course of action, that there has been no finality on this. Now, I know Cian O'Sullivan retired yesterday, so you know, they're obviously in a situation where there was a chance of players coming back or not, as the case may be, up until very late in the day. And so I assume that it's the same situation with Cluxton. You know, like the word is that he has been working with Josh Moran, the Dublin goalkeeping coach, in some capacity, but and like he plays centre back for Parnells, or did at the weekend anyway. So why he'd be working with a goalkeeping coach if he didn't intend on coming back, I don't know.
Maybe he's taking over from Conor.
I mean, he could probably line out at 6 for Dublin next week. But like, if it comes to it, Evan Comerford is an excellent goalkeeper. And the one shortfall in his game when he came on at the very start for Dublin was that, you know, that kick that Cluxton has when the opposition press right up. The one for Brian Howard, you know, in the 2019 Drawn All-Ireland final, where you go over the top and you kick it 70 yards. He didn't have that. But I saw a couple of kicks that he had against Kerry in the league, so he's seriously developed that element of his game. But it's probably not for his goalkeeping that Dublin will miss Stephen Cluxton if he doesn't come back. It's his presence, you know. Like there is a sort of a, you know, because there's a bit of mystique over Cluxton because he you know, appears so infrequently in public, you know, in terms of media and all the rest of it. You know, he does have an aura, and he does give Dublin, you know, another sort of, I don't know, an air of invincibility or whatever way you want to call it. Like, he has been an absolute phenomenon in everything he has done for Dublin. So like he will be hugely missed. But like at this stage in the day, I wouldn't be surprised if anything happened. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if he never came back again, and I wouldn't be surprised if he started in the second round of the championship. But as it stands, I think it's very unlikely he's going to play against Wexford next weekend.
Yeah, and I suppose if he doesn't play against Wexford, it's hardly the end of the world, Michael. You know, and you know, conceivably you wouldn't need Cluxton, you know, quote unquote, until you know, a All-Ireland semi-final potentially. You would have to say, but with a truncated championship, with it all being very compressed, it does seem unlikely that he would miss, a good portion of it and then just walk back in. I don't think the Dublin management would want that, or the team. Would the team want that even, that if he just came back in later on in the year?
Yeah, it's a strange one, because obviously, like, they've been working, what is it, the last 14 weeks they've been back, officially back anyway. So, like, whatever they've been working on throughout that 14 weeks, and I'm not saying that's been massively different from what he's been involved in the last couple of years, but there's bound to be different things, and you have to be in tune with what's going on with different plays and things like that. I do think it's been really smart. Was it 3 years ago Cluxton got injured against Longford, and Evan Comerford came in, and he's had loads of game time in the last 3 years, kind of quietly. Cluxton coming back later in the league, maybe missing the odd early championship game. So I think he's kind of gained a lot of experience very smartly over the last couple of years. And now, when maybe if he is coming in, maybe permanently now for Cluxton, if Cluxton walks away, he's not coming in cold. He's got lots of minutes under his belt. But it's another one of the subplots that's going to be interesting to play out over the next while. Like, everything's going to be over in like 2 months' time. So if Cluxton is going to be back in, he's going to have to be back in like pretty soon.
Yeah, Ciaran, and this last question is before you move on to the weekend's action. Like, at what point is the tipping point? Like, you're losing McCaffrey, Paul Mannion, then the veterans like Diarmuid Connolly, Bernard Brogan, Paddy Andrews, Cian O'Sullivan now, and then potentially Stephen Cluxton. When do they get to that tipping point where, even with the strength and depth in the panel, it does become too much to continue this All-Ireland kind of streak they've been on?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's when that streak is broken ultimately. But from Cluxton's perspective, I think if you look at the role of goalkeepers and you look at some of the top teams that have really competent keepers, cool under pressure, the likes of Rory Began, even Morgan and Tyrone, Cluxton has had that for Dublin, where over the years teams might rattle him for 4 or 5 minutes, but then he comes out in the second half and puts on a display and can recover mentally within a game and is never phased. And I think it's such a tough position and such a tough role to play. And you can see some of the teams that are probably in the second tier, and even Kerry to a certain degree, trying to settle on a goalkeeper and somebody, because it's such an important role that they have to play in terms of linking, and there's so much pressure on them. And we even saw young Fitzgibbon and Kerry, having a little bit of a wobble against Clare at the weekend, where you could see it got to him. He had a couple of kickouts in a row that rattled him. So, like, I think that's the challenge from a Dublin perspective, in that, when you're in that heated battle, when there is that clutch moment, when it is going down the stretch in a semi-final or final, and you need a keeper to deliver 2 or 3 crucial kickouts, that's what Cluxton was able to do. So I think that's, you wouldn't realise maybe the impact maybe till later in the year when you are in one of those situations. But listen, from a Dublin perspective, a lot of guys now, Keane obviously moving on, said last night, class act, a class player. What he's contributed to Dublin has been phenomenal over the last decade. But, one of my concerns, going into the championship is, when you look at maybe Dublin's depth, that they used to have, when we used to talk about the impact of the subs that could come off the bench and how frightening it was for opposition defenders to see, a Diarmuid Connolly or a Kevin McManamon coming in, in the height of their powers with 15, 20 minutes to go. That would be a little bit of a concern for Dublin going forward. And on the other hand, you look at Kerry, who are coming down the line, building, trying to make a statement, and have developed a bit of depth right throughout the pitch in their forward line, midfield defenders. There's 6 or 7 very experienced guys on the bench there at the weekend against Clare. So, Dublin have lost a lot of quality, a lot of key players, the likes of Mannion, McCaffrey, Connolly, now we're talking about Cluxton, clutch players that have delivered in crucial moments. So it definitely levels the playing field a bit.
Yeah, and speaking of Kerry, Conor, I know you were in Fitzgerald Stadium on Saturday night, for their win over Clare. A couple of late goals, really hammered home their dominance in the end. Did you learn anything? Did anything particularly stand out to you or impress you about them?
Oh, like, Sean O'Shea and David Clifford are a brilliant double act. They're as good, I'd say,